If you had to choose a pro to model your game after, who would you choose? I know I have some ideas, and I know that they have impacted my game in different ways, but I'm interested to hear from you. Go ahead and comment down below, who are you trying to model your game after? Hey everybody, what is up? It's Antonio. Welcome to episode 29 of Teach Play Disc Golf. I am so excited for this week's episode. We have some different things to talk about this week. We definitely still have some things that are following our normal agenda, but the topics themselves are slightly different. We have a disc golf skill that's going to talk about modeling our game after pros. After that, we're going to talk about what it's like to tour as a pro. Now, I'm not a touring pro, so this is a pro tip from Chris Dickerson, and I'm super excited to share what he had to say about this topic. After that, we're going to recap Maple Hill. I am so excited to talk about it. And then we will preview the USWDGC that is taking place on Thursday, the day that this podcast drops. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. Okay, I asked you at the very beginning of this episode, who would you model or who are you modeling your game after? And sports is a comparison game. We are constantly comparing people all the time, whether it's ourselves or whether it is others. Think about prospects, in baseball resembling pros in the majors. We have rookies, whether it's in football or basketball, rookies saying, hey, they have a similar play style to these legends of the game. And then probably one of the most common debates that we've had recently in comparison in sports is MJ versus LeBron. Who is the GOAT of basketball? Now, we may have opinions about that, but that's not the focus here. All I'm trying to point out is that comparison is part of sports, and that's okay. It's never ending. This podcast is not going to put an end to comparisons, but I want us to just think about pros that we try to emulate, pros that we try to model our game after. Something I want us to think about is it healthy, and is it actually good for our game? You see, in disc golf, it's easy to watch a pro and say, I want to do that. And I saw Drew Gibson do it that way, Paul Macbeth do it that way, Kristen Tatar do it that way, Owen Scoggins do it this way. So let me throw like them. Let me throw exactly like them, because if that's how they do it, that's how I should do it. And it's natural for us to want to imitate some of these role models, imitate our idols in different sports. It's common to want to imitate these specific skills. Now, for a small percentage of people out there, when they're imitating their idols, it actually works for them. Something about it is the movement, the language that's used, it works for them. But for the vast majority, in my experience, it doesn't. It doesn't work for all of us. And there's one reason why, if we're looking at big, broad statements and not getting into the nitty-gritty details of it all, the big reason why is that we all have different bodies. The way someone else throws the disc is, while I may try to emulate specific things about them or about their throw, it's not going to naturally translate because my body moves differently. See, we tend to try to mimic the process, in this case the form, but that's not as beneficial as mimicking the principles. So really what we have here is a discussion of process versus principles. And I want to encourage you to allow the processes to inspire you and to motivate you, but focus on the principles. And here's what I mean. Pros as a standard have good form. You're not throwing at that level with that consistency if you don't have good form, if you don't have the fundamentals down in your throw. But instead of hyper focusing on one pro, at a time, I want to encourage us to pay attention to common themes, these principles that we see among all the different pros. Mimic the things that you see a lot of the pros doing at the top level. I've had this discussion multiple times over the years running a YouTube channel. I'll talk about a general skill, let's say. And someone will say, James Conrad does it this way, Eric Oakley does it this way, Garrett Gerthy does it that way, so on and so forth. And I mentioned those three players specifically because they have some of the most unique forms or approaches to the game than some other players. And while it works for them, throwing the way Eric Oakley throws is not necessarily going to be the best way for all of us to throw. It works for him. It works for the way he learned how to play the game. But that just because that little hop step that both he and Garrett Gerthy do and how Eric flings his left arm up really high doesn't mean that we do that and we're going to get the same result. For a lot of these players, it's about timing and comfort and muscle memory. So we want to mimic the things that we see a lot of pros at the top level doing, specifically in the principles, because we're all going to have our idiosyncrasies and variations and nuances in our form, but it's the principles that are the same. For example, if I had two silhouettes of two different disc golfers, so meaning silhouette is just a black figure, basically a shadow, okay? And so you don't know who they are by looking at them, but I showed you their form in silhouette. And let's say it was Calvin and Anthony Barilla. You would know exactly which one is which just by their silhouette. You would be able to tell the difference. Same thing if I took Owen Scoggins and Kristen Tatar, or Paul versus Ricky, or Paige versus Kat. The silhouettes will be able to determine, based on the variations in all of their forms, who it is. But in all of those variations, with all of the nuances that they might have, they have the same principles. And here are 7 principles that they have. This is not at all exhaustive, but this is just overarching themes that I want to encourage you to pay attention to when you're looking at pros and how they throw. The first thing is the X step. We have some pros do quicker. We have some pros do slower. But the principle about the X step is that it's this transfer of momentum and weight from one foot to the next, and there is a rhythm to it. Okay, and so you want to make sure that you have some kind of rhythm with your X step. The next thing is lower body engagement. Every single one of these pros uses the lower body to throw the disc. They are not relying solely on their arm. The third principle that we see with all of these pros, even the ones I haven't named, is that their extension is out from their body, okay? I have been calling it extension now for the last several months, maybe even longer than that, instead of reaching out or reaching back, just to sort of separate what I mean, because for the longest time I said reaching back. I don't mean that because people tend to think it means reaching directly behind you, and reaching out might seem a little strange. So extending out from your body. Every single one of these pros does that. You want to extend out from your body. With that lower body engagement in the second point that I made, the fourth point is this gliding forward. Now, maybe the term gliding doesn't help with you. Maybe it's transitioning your momentum, shifting your weight, gliding forward, basically moving into your brace leg. Every single one of these pros does that with the lower body engagement, and they come forward onto their plant foot. With all of these things that I just mentioned, we then have the fifth thing, and that is this cascading effect that I've talked about several times that I learned from Cade Caps. And it's this cascading effect of everything starts from the ground and moves up. And so when I did the the baseball series videos, there were 2 or 3 of them, basically talking about how swinging the bat in baseball goes from your legs first, then your elbow, or then your back or torso, then your arms, and then your hands. It's this cascading effect of motion coming across the plate. Same thing with disc golf. It all starts from the bottom and moves up to your body. And that's how you get this sort of lag effect or rubber band effect, depending on what you like to call it, that we hear a lot of disc golf coaches talk about. And so you get that with the cascading effect. The sixth thing that we're going to see in any top tier pro that we're looking at is compact form. Now, I understand that there are some players out there, outliers, who may be able to throw with less compact form. For example, Juliana Korver. But don't forget, Juliana Korver is a 5-time world champion, mainly from the 90s into the early 2000s. And she has won world championships in many disc sports. So she has had not only years of practice, but she's had a lot of different influences on her game. And so her form is not nearly as compact. She has a much more old school form and is throws a little bit more loose, kind of like as if she were throwing a frisbee, okay? But for the most part, we're going to see very compact form with players like Kristen Tatar, Haley King, Paige Pierce, Katrina Allen, Ella Hansen, okay? These kinds of players we're seeing that compact form. And then the final thing, the seventh thing that you'll see, and like I said, this is not exhaustive principles. There's a lot more that we could dive into, but just overarching ideas. A clean follow through. Every one of these pros has a clean follow through. They're not hitting themselves while they throw, and they're not stopping short when they throw, which would cause injury and put a sudden stop in their movement, which would affect the disc's trajectory, accuracy, and power. A clean follow through is also one of the ways that you kind of know whether or not you threw it good, ironically. How you finish the throw is a good indication of how well you threw it. Did you finish the throw well balanced? Did you finish exactly how you needed to finish on the throw? When you're throwing the forehand, was your chest pointed up at the sky, down at the ground, or directly at your target for it to help with that nose angle? So there are a lot of different things that are indicated by your follow through, and a clean follow through helps you kind of get a good idea that, hey, I think I was successful with this throw. So I want to just encourage you, don't try to look like a pro, because your body is very different than their bodies, and they've spent time training, you're spending time training and working on this. It's okay to look at the processes or their form and say, and be inspired by those things. It's okay to do that. In fact, that's encouraged, but don't get hung up on trying to throw like them, in the sense of, if we had two silhouettes of you and a pro, that they would look identical. Instead, take these principles and apply them to your form and allow your body to indicate and dictate to you the best way for you individually to throw. And you're going to have way more success with disc golf, with your scores, with your form, when you relinquish that strict imitation of a pro and rather say, how can I take these principles and apply them to my game? You're going to have way more success doing that and see a lot more growth in your distance and accuracy and form. So I hope you guys found this tip helpful. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, it's a little bit different than some of the stuff we've talked about. It's a little bit more of a soft skill. There's this combination of this mental mindset that you have to have, but also it works on the physical aspects of the game. And so I hope you found that encouraging. I still want to know, who are some of your role models when it comes to disc golf? And so go ahead and comment down below. Who are some of your role models? I'd love to hear about it. Who inspires you with your disc golf journey? So let's go ahead and let's now talk about this really cool tip from Chris Dickerson. So last week I messaged Chris Dickerson, and he is awesome and replies and interacts with his fans. And I just said, hey man, you've played disc golf for quite some time now. He's from Tennessee. He was, he was basically a local pro for a long time, but he has traveled the country for quite some time now. He's won some pretty big events. And so I just asked him, what is it like to tour for years and years, be on that touring grind? And then what would you tell aspiring amateurs about touring that you wish you knew when you were getting started? And not much later, Chris responded to me, and it was super awesome. And basically, what he said was, I did not like traveling in the beginning, but it has gotten better. When you have played an event for multiple years, you can look back on how you've done in past years and think about how you can improve this time around. And then he finished up by answering one of that last questions about aspiring amateurs. Getting sponsored is really about playing well and traveling to bigger events. So now some of these things might seem, oh, we've heard that before, or a little generic, but there's a lot of truth behind it, because this is coming from someone who said that he didn't like to travel a bunch. I know that there were some rumors in the past when he was on Prodigy and then switched to Discraft. I think some of it had to do that Prodigy was just not willing to compensate him more to help him with touring or to give him a van or any kinds of those things, where Discraft basically gave them like an RV, he and his wife, or something along those lines. So definitely there was, he has experienced a difference when your sponsor helps a little bit more. Now, he did say it's gotten better. Obviously, winning is going to have a big impact on that. The more you win, or the closer you place, especially in the top 10, the more money you make. And the more money you make on the road, life is a lot easier. You can afford gas, you can afford food, this, that, and the other thing. But he said something that I thought was really interesting. And this is, it requires you to tour for several years to reap this benefit, but you will eventually reap the benefit. And he talked about traveling over the years gives you familiarity with different types of golf and courses. And that's me kind of paraphrasing and building off of that, but it's this idea that, hey, when we go to Smuggler's Notch every year, you play that course for the first time, even after a couple practice rounds, it's probably still going to beat you up pretty good, especially if you're fairly new on tour. But when you come back the next year, and then the year after that, and then the year after that, and then you've played there for 5 straight years with 5 years of practice rounds and then tournament rated rounds, you start to get better, or you will be better. You're going to have a better understanding of the course, better expectations of what the course will look like, how you will perform, your strengths and weaknesses, the best landing zones. You start to build a really full strategy when you tackle these courses. And so that's one of the benefits of just going through the grind and touring and doing what needs to get done in order to win at the course, but also to have a successful touring career. Now, when you talked about getting sponsored, something for amateurs that's really helpful, and here's the thing, you can be sponsored and not be on tour. Okay, so if you didn't know that, that's super helpful information. But getting sponsored by a manufacturer who's going to basically compensate you, whether it's with disc sales or some kind of base salary or whatever it might be, depending on how the contracts are working in 2023, getting sponsored helps. There's just something to be said about making enough money. And when you normally start on tour, a lot of players who start on tour are not going to be near the top. We've had a few anomalies over the years, but for the most part, that is, you got to do local touring first. Calvin Heimberg stayed in the Southeast for years, and then he started doing national tours. He was in college at the time. Same with Anthony Barella. He would travel here or there. Gannon Burr is an anomaly, one of the anomalies I'm talking about. She hasn't played in at least a year, but Heather Young is another anomaly. She was in high school playing in the FPO field. So touring helps. Now, how can you do that? You have to play well. At the end of the day, to be a sponsored pro, being sponsored helps. How do you do that? You have to play well. And you have to travel to bigger events. There is a cost that you have to be willing to pay before you can reap the benefits, reap the rewards from that. You need to go to where the quote unquote scouts are. Okay, if you're unsponsored, or maybe you're just sponsored by a local disc golf retailer, but you want to get sponsored by a manufacturer to kind of help and develop and build your career, you have to go where these major companies are hosting these bigger events. Obviously, you need to make sure you're good enough to play in them to catch their eye, but you have to go there as well. They won't hear about you if they don't see you play. I would be shocked if manufacturers will look at an Instagram profile and sponsor somebody who doesn't come on local tours or on the big nation tours and give them a bunch of money and a van and that kind of thing. Like, they're going to want to see you play. So eventually you're going to have to make the commitment to travel before you even get a deal like that. And so there's kind of, going all in. And that's why, even though disc golf has been around for a while, professionals, it's a risk. It's a calculated risk, and you see mainly younger people doing it because they are at a point in their lives where they could go put all the chips in the middle of the table and basically chase their dream that way. So you definitely want to make sure that you are playing well and you go to these bigger events. There's nothing wrong with big events around you, but going to things on the Disc Golf Pro Tour or big A tiers where other pros are going to be and competing with the best of the best, that's going to not only help you improve your skills, but you're also going to get noticed. Now, this is Chris Dickerson talking about this, and I'm just relaying the message to you. So I hope you guys found that helpful. I know a lot of us are just really more looking to improve our game, be as competitive as we can in the local scene. But if you are looking to make it big, you want to be a touring pro, I hope you found this information helpful and that it was encouraging to you. And this is there are concepts here that all of us can take. It requires dedication no matter what we do in life, whether it's disc golf or our jobs or family and this, that, and the other thing. So we have to be dedicated. And so that's really the big thing here. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and let's talk about Maple Hill. I'm super excited to cover this with you guys. Maple Hill was wild. There was so much happening. The tournament started off great. The weather was beautiful. It was gorgeous. Everything was good. And then we had some horrible winds to the point where some players were questioning whether or not it was even safe enough for them to play. I know I saw Chandler Kramer specifically talking about this. He shared some videos and the winds were wild. There was a tropical storm or a hurricane coming up from the Atlantic up into the New England and Canadian territories and areas up there. So I'm glad that everyone was able to be safe. Maple Hill definitely had a lot of different weather this weekend. And because of that, there were so many people in the running. By round 4, the final round, you thought you had a good idea of who was going to win or who was really in the running. But at the same time, it was like, man, so much has changed. For example, FPO going, let me think. I think it was going into round 2. Yeah, I think it was going into round 2. Evelina Salonen had shot -6 round 1. So going into round 2, the leader was at -6. The winning score for the tournament was -7. I mean, to think that someone was at -6 and then over the next 3 days of golf, only one stroke better, that's how you know the conditions had gotten so rough over the middle 2 days that so many players, especially in the FPO field, shot over par, which increased their scores. And then they had to climb back over really the course of the final round, but a little bit of round 3 as well, trying to fight the wind as much as possible. There was a lot working against them. And I just thought that was incredible to think about. Like, wow, -6 going into round 2, and the winning score after 4 rounds was -7. That's just pretty wild to think about. So FPO had a lot of drama happening. The final round, there were some events that took place that I just couldn't believe. Owen Scoggins, I think it was a 7 that she took. And you would think that she went OB multiple times because Owen is so consistent, not just with her throws, but with putting. But I'm pretty sure on that hole, I don't think she went OB. If she did go OB, she might have gone OB once, but even then, I don't think she went OB. She just 3 or 4 putted. She was inside the circle. This is Owen Scoggins we're talking about. She's leading the tournament at this point at -6. I think Kristen Tatar is at -5 at this point. And she goes and 3 or 4 putts. And we're not talking like they were all long 30 footers, like 10 feet away. And she, I feel bad saying this, but she went and pulled an Evelina Salonen and just completely whiffed multiple times. So a lot happened there in FPO. MPO was incredible. It was another chase card victory. I don't know how many that makes for this year, but Matty O from the chase card gets his first Elite Series victory, if I understand correctly, on the Pro Tour. He went -7 on the back 9. He finished with a score of -23, which means that heading into the final 9, the final back 9, he was at -16. Okay, which is still pretty good, but all the leaders at that point were around the same score, if not a little better or maybe a little worse, and several holes behind. And so really it was just looking like, okay, there's always a chance in that case for chase card to win, but the leaders having the same score, even though you're multiple holes ahead, typically it's going to favor the lead card. Not in this case. Matty O got it. So excited for him. Something that's incredible about this, though, is that 7,413 days ago, Matt Oram competed in his first Elite Series event. Now, I believe it was called the National Tour back then, but 7,413 days ago, for those of you who do quick math, that's over 20 years ago when he competed on the first Pro Tour version, whatever it was at the time. 20 plus years ago. Super exciting for him to get that first win like that. Matty O is someone who's always kind of been more local touring pro. He's just always been well known for his personality and his performance when he did show up for the big events like Worlds. But it's super excited for him that he's been able to tour nationally for the last couple of years, and everybody has gotten to know about him, and he's just a really cool person. I love his personality. I think it's great. He's a lot of fun to watch. Very good disc golfer. And going back to what we opened this episode with about unique forms and that kind of thing, Matty O definitely falls under that category. And while his process, his form might be unique and could inspire us in ways, we want to make sure that we pay attention to the principles of his form, those things that we talked about, and how he does all those things just like all the other players. He just has his own nuances to it. So Maple Hill, though, I love this course. Like I said last week, I got to play here 2 years ago. It's crazy to believe that it's been that long, but yeah, about 2 years ago. It's such a cool course, as you guys know. I will say, I'll iterate it again. The camera does not do hole 10 justice. That hole is so tough, so uphill, so difficult. I will say that I'd noticed a few slight changes just on the grounds themselves. A lot of the commentators mention these kinds of things, like a rock wall on hole 2, I believe it is, to prevent the rollers. So that's a change. And several of the holes actually sort of had wooden barriers put up to kind of prevent some rollaways on some tricky greens. I think that's a really good touch by Gage and the rest of the Maple Hill crew who works on the course year round. I think that's a good touch. It's not necessarily making the course easier, but just more playable and enjoyable. You know, some of those greens are super slopey, and if you don't have something to kind of prevent ridiculous rollaways on what should be a good approach shot, it kind of makes it hard to enjoy a layout or a hole or a basket pin position. So I'm glad they made some of those changes. They cleaned up some of the areas. And the course looked so good. It looked like a lot of fun. Some of those water shots are so ridiculously beautiful, but so difficult. So that is the Maple MVP Open at Maple Hill. Let's go ahead and let's go through the results. So in MPO, like I said, we have Matty O in first place at -23. In second place, we had a little bit of a meltdown here with Aaron Gossage, who was Aaron Gossage and Eagle McMahon, who were tied for second, minus 19. Multiple times they just couldn't get it rolling. Then they took some double bogeys or a bogey here or there that just prevented them from shooting as well as they could have. Tied for fourth, we had Ricky Wysocki, Simon Lizotte, and Calvin Heimberg at minus 17. Seventh place, we have Ben Callaway. We haven't talked about Ben Callaway a lot this season. Minus 14 in seventh place. Eighth place, Ezra Robinson and Kevin Jones at minus 13. And 10th place, Alden Harris, minus 10. Another top 10 finish for Alden. So super happy for him. We had 11 strokes separating the top 10, which I feel like has been abnormal this season. We don't see that much separation in MPO. In FPO, we had Haley King in first place at minus 7. Tied for second, Kristen Tatar and Owen Scoggins at minus 6. Fourth place, Evelina Solonen at minus 3. And then fifth place, Holly Finley at plus 2. Sixth place, Holland Hanley at plus 3. Seventh place, Macy Bella Diaz at plus 4. And then eighth place, tied for eighth, Henna Blomroos, Valerie Mendijano at plus 9. And Allie Smith rounding out the top 10 at plus 10. So we had 17 strokes separating FPO and 11 strokes separating MPO. MVP Open at Maple Hill is always a good time. It's always a lot of fun. A lot of fun to play. You know, when I have been there, it was a fun course to play, and it's definitely a fun course to watch. Now, we have some pretty exciting stuff coming up this weekend. We have the USWDGC. Now, this changed a couple years ago where the men and the women used to play basically their version of the USDGC at the same time on the same weekend. It was complicated. It wasn't always the best for either side. And so they separated the two tournaments a few years ago. And the women now have an entire weekend dedicated to them, the USWDGC. It's also at a different course. This year, it's going to be it's in Burlington, North Carolina, at the, I have it pulled up here, at the Cedar Rock course in Burlington, North Carolina. There are multiple courses there. I'm looking it up on Disc Golf Scene and on PDGA. They're going to be rotating through some of the courses, like they do over a couple days. It's a 4-day tournament starting on Thursday, which is when this episode comes out. And something that's really unique, and I believe it would be the first time in history, if I'm remembering the statistic correctly, Kristen Tatar is looking to be the first player ever. I don't even think it's happened in MPO to sweep all the majors in one season. There are 4 majors. She has won all 3 majors, and she's looking to get the 4th and final major this year and complete the first sweep in history. That would be awesome. Now, this course is going to be challenging based on images and videos that I have seen. Based on what I've seen on UDisc and the disc golf scene, there's a combo of wooded holes and open holes. It looks like the players are going to be challenged, but it looks like it's also going to be really fun golf to watch. I am super excited to see what this tournament looks like and how it plays out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So with that said, I will be making my picks. Let's see. Let me pull up the roster of who's playing. So with that said, I'm super excited about this. I always love looking at new courses. Cedar Rock sounds like a familiar course to me. I don't know if it's been used years past for like the college national championships or something like that. It might have. I'm not entirely certain. But anyway, I'm looking at the FPO field right now. I got it. One thing I didn't mention when going over Maple Hill, I was absolutely shocked at how well Owen Scoggins performed given her injury. I could not believe it. I was not expecting her to play that well. I thought, hey, she had to drop out of Worlds. There's no way that she's going to be able to perform, and she did. She didn't throw a lot of backhands. Even with the forehand, she was starting to exhibit some pain. She was feeling it in her arm. She's already talked about how she's going to push and grind through the last couple tournaments before taking several weeks off. I hope she doesn't injure herself, but I definitely can't count her out of the USWDGC. She did not finish last year because of injury. I think it was her groin. So hopefully this time she can finish this year, but I'm definitely looking at Owen Scoggins, definitely looking at Kristen Tatar to play well here. And I'm going to go with a player I haven't selected in quite some time to round out my top 3, and I'm thinking Emily Beach, and there's a reason why. When we had the Blue Ridge Mountain Championships, I think in May, it was around that time, in this part of the country, Emily Beach played really, really well. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see her play really well again. And it would just be really cool. I believe she's lefty. It's going to be really interesting to see how she tackles some of these holes. So I'm super excited for that. So I'm calling on. I think Kristen will probably win if I had to pick 1, 2, 3. But my favorites here are going to be Kristen Tatar, Owen Scoggins, like everybody else. But then my dark horse winner is Emily Beach. So I will put those on UDisc for the Grip 6 pick, and I'm super excited to see. I will share them on my social media, on my Discord. If you're not part of those communities, whether you don't follow me on Instagram yet or you haven't joined my Discord, links in the description to do that. That is everything, everybody. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed talking to you guys about it. It was a lot of fun just dialing in or discussing this idea of process versus principles, and I hope that you were able to learn something, that you could glean something from it to be helpful for your game. I hope the tip from Chris Dickerson was super helpful. I know I found it super helpful. I would love to, I'll admit it, I think a lot of us disc golfers would love to play professionally, and that would be our full-time job. That would be really awesome. So it was great to hear from Chris Dickerson himself on kind of what that's like and how amateurs can work towards that kind of goal. And then we recapped Maple Hill and previewed the USWDGC, which I am so excited for. If you have not watched a lot of FPO competition this year, I want to strongly encourage you to tune in to the USWDGC. These women are awesome, awesome disc golfers, and I can't wait to see them play. So that's all I have for you today, guys. That's episode 29. I want to encourage you here at Teach Play Disc Golf to go out this weekend and teach someone how to play disc golf. I'm excited. I'm playing with a couple people this weekend. One is Jared that I've played with before, and he's still fairly new. And another guy, Colton, he's played for about 10, 15 years, but hasn't ever really played, consistently and those kinds of things. So I'm excited to play with some people who are still learning the game, still having fun. I cannot wait. Make sure you go ahead and teach someone, give a word of encouragement. Make sure you also go out and play some disc golf this weekend. We had some unfortunate bad weather last weekend, so I didn't get to play as much as I was wanting, so I'm super excited for this upcoming weekend. So make sure you go ahead and play as well. And that is all for episode 29 of Teach Play Disc Golf. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time. Have a great round.